Okay, so we can see that what we've got as a simple little game of whack-a-fox. We've got our two holes, and the fox is successfully appearing randomly between hole 1 and hole 2. But the problem is it's happening way too quickly. So what we want to do is we want to have some sort of a countdown, because currently we have a function that says place fox, and that gets called every single time the update function is called. And the game updates it, I think it's 30 or 60 times, 50 times a second, which is way too fast. So what we want to do is we only want to place the fox if a certain amount of time has elapsed, right? So why don't we create some sort of a timer function, timer, or like a countdown. So let's say our countdown is, say, 50. And when I reach down to 0, then I'm going to want to place the fox. So at the very, very beginning of the game, well, let's go with timer equals 50. So now, instead of calling the update function all the time, let's come through and say, hey, if our timer has reached 0, then that means it's time to place the fox. If it hasn't reached 0 yet, else we must still be counting down. Let's take our timer and subtract 1 from it. So that it was 50, now let's make it 49. So this will be called 50 times before it reaches 0. And at that point, then we say, okay, now let's place the fox. So that will give me some time to go and actually try to whack it. If I run this, it's going to fail. Does anyone know, remotely or locally, why I'm going to get an error if I do this? It has to do with the very start of the lesson before we even looked at graphics. What did we look at Replit? What were we doing in Replit? Anyone? Let's run it. We'll get our error. Oh, there's an error. Why? Unbound local error. The local variable timer was referenced before assignment. The local variable. It thinks that I'm referencing some variable that's just within this update function. But instead, I actually want to reference this variable from way up there, which is a global variable. So I need to let the computer know that timer is a global variable. And that will now give me access to make a change to that global variable. And if I run that now, okay, that's still pretty darn fast. Did it slow down at all? Let me change this to, say, 500. I don't really have a sense of how much time is. Let's try this again. Oh, I know what's going on. 500. So that very first time, it paused it, but then it's super fast. So what's happening is, once I've reached 0 and I place my fox, it comes back up here. The next time it comes back down, I keep subtracting 1 from it. So what I need to do is I need to reset my timer. Once I place my new fox, I got to set my timer back to a value of 50. So when I place my fox, if timer is equal to 0, let's set timer back to 50 and then place my fox. So it wasn't that my timer was 500. That wasn't the issue. When we run this now, because I haven't set an x value, it sets the x value at 0, walks the y value is at 75. That's why it's placing my fox over down here at the left. And it waits, I think, 5 seconds before it generates a random number. And we've got some randomness taking place. Now this is taking too long. Something to do with our randomness between 1 to 100. So first of all, let's correct the issue that when I run the code, he appears at the side of the screen for like 5 seconds before he actually moves. We don't want that. Instead, let's set our timer equal to be 0 at the very beginning. So the first time the game is run, the time is 0. So then we set our place fox. So that should get rid of the issue of the fox appearing at the very side of the screen. So that's the first issue. So that's resolved that. Now our issue is something to do with the fact that he seems to be off screen for way too long. And so he appeared there, and then what happened? I think we only want to, so he's appearing there. We are resetting him, we're setting our timer to 50 at the wrong spot. I think we place our fox, and only if he's off screen, we don't need it to wait it, because if it gets a value of 5, then it waits 50 seconds. Then if it gets a value of 7, it gets 50 seconds. We only want to pause him for 50 seconds or 50 ticks if he gets placed successfully at position 1 or 2. So once we place him at position 1 or 2, let's define our timer to be global. And if he's successfully placed in the hole, then we're going to say, let's set our timer back to be 50. Or if he's at position 2, let's set our fox, or sorry, our timer back to be 50. So now what happens is, when I reach my 0, the timer ticks down. We place my fox. It places the fox it gets a random number. If he's off screen, I don't do anything to my timer. I think if timer is equal to or is less than or equal to 0. We place our fox. So this will, I think, address our issue. All right, so he's appearing a little bit more frequently. Now, our timing may or may not be good. We can change how quickly the randomness appears. Maybe we want to increase how often he's not in a hole. So I could generate a number from 1 to 200, for example. These are numbers that you'll have to play with to decide what is the optimal amount for you. Just a second. So that's kind of the general idea. Sorry, was that your hand or no? Oh, yeah. Yep. So that's the, we've now basically have our fox appearing randomly at a more reasonable time frame. All right, so that's tutorial number 2, and I'll stop that, and we are off on